Hey folks, it's Bear Gardener, and it's time for another deck guide video. I'm hoping to do some more of these because they seem to be going down well, so obviously let me know if you do continue to want more of them. As ever, I am a content creator and streamer. You can find all the information down below. Like, subscribe, you know the drill, and as always, if you are able to support through the support links, does make a huge difference, makes it more likely that I'm able to do more of these. But on the whole, I just enjoy doing videos and talking about cards. So I wanted to do videos on a variety of decks. My last one as a guide video was on a mid-range deck, which was a US-France mid-range deck, which some people have really enjoyed and apparently had some success on. This time I want to talk about a deck that kind of comes at the other end of the spectrum, so we're going to talk about a control deck, and a little bit about what control decks are as well. But we're going to talk about a control deck that I think is very, very good. It's certainly been incredibly successful for me. This season, my win rate on this deck has been north of 85% consistently. Once you learn to play it, like many control decks, it's very, very good. So let's talk about what the deal is with this. So we're going to look at SOV, Soviet control, but Soviet Italy is a thing at the minute, and you'll see it a lot. You'll see lots of Soviet Italy control decks, which are all about kind of stalling out quite efficiently and then using HQ defense gain primarily through the use of either their engineers or the Fiat G50 and claim the skies. And it does work, and they do have some interesting finishes, but in my opinion it is actually the less good option if you want to run a Soviet main control deck, and my testing proves it. My win rate, by the way, on Soviet Italy control, if you're interested for comparisons, is round about 78–80%, depending on when it is at the season. So there is about 5% increase in my testing. Note my testing on this, while you will see me playing on stream, all of my testing is done off stream because when I'm streaming I can't concentrate to the same level, but I've also had some good success on previous streams. So I consider this to be a very strong deck, and so do other top players. I'm not going to call out names, but there are a number of people I know who also agree with me that this is probably the stronger of the two Soviet control builds right now. What is the point of a control build like this? Well, generally speaking, you're looking to win the game late, which means that you're looking to make sure that you pull the game, you make the game go long. Often control decks will win either through having an overwhelmingly strong unit or board presence that just keeps whittling away at the opponent, or some kind of big single hit unit. And at the moment, a big one and a big part of this deck is front formation, which allows you to spend a single point of your HQ defense at the start of every turn. It automatically happens. You take the damage, but you gain a T-34 1945, I think it is, but you gain it's a 5/5 blitz tank with 2 op costs. So for the rest of the game, at a cost of 1 HQ defense and 4 credits, you can deal 5 damage to something, usually the enemy's HQ. And this is the primary win condition of this deck, not the only win condition of this deck, but it's certainly a card that we're very aware of and we want to see. As usual, the way I'm going to approach this is I'm going to take you through the deck, card by card, talk about it, talk about tactics, and then present some gameplay, because it seems to be a format that everyone likes, and that gameplay will have commentary from myself on my own play. The gameplay is unvarnished. I just pull some games kind of mostly at random, but they are kind of based on the ones that are interesting and have good observation from my own experience, and they're not always super positive, and I don't play perfectly in all of them because that would be kind of pointless. And this is a hard deck to play well, but we'll get to that after we've had a look at the deck. So first of all, let's go and actually look at the deck and figure out where we are from there. Okay, so here we are in the game client. This is my deck list, and we'll go through it card by card as I usually do. One thing I want to get out of the way at the beginning is this is an incredibly expensive deck. You can see just elites and specials everywhere, and that is one of the prices of control lists. They are very expensive. You need a lot of very good cards to build the top end list. You also need to be very good. So it's a list that takes a bit of learning, but let's go through and talk about the cards that we have and what we're using them for. So the first card is ZHUKOV. ZHUKOV is really useful in this deck in a way that I think you rarely object to seeing this early in the game. You are mulliganing for more specific things in a perfect world, specifically removal and an early-ish guard. We'll talk about that in a minute. But what ZHUKOV is good for is fishing for the infantry that you have, and whatever infantry you get obviously gets +1/+1 and Blitz. Blitz is not always that important, but the +1/+1 is huge. Next up we have the 329th Engineer Battalion, and this is just a value tool. So because one of our primary win conditions is front formation, the other of our primary win conditions is honestly outlasting even up to and including fatigue our opponent, having the ability that every time we lose a unit our HQ gains defense is massive. We have the 97th Rifles. We love this card. This card is just incredibly good value because we then get the 414th, which the most important part of the 414th is actually getting us another 97th back so we can continually cycle it, which is really good if we're going into a super long game. But also, it's a really good body and we get card draw. And we want card draw because we want to see our tools. We run a full set of Bloody Sickle. This is just both card draw and damage, and we can use it either way. This thing is absolutely amazing against aggro decks early. If you're against a deck that you expect will be aggro focused, say Japan aggro or something that's liable to run low defense units, you mulligan very aggressively for this card because this card is good control early, and the card draw is always welcome. The fact that it cantrips, that it replaces itself, is a real bonus. Siberian Transfer. So we're kind of going to come back to this when we get to the other half of this card, because this card is part of a 2-card combo primarily. But what this does is it gives us a really quick mini front formation. So we add T-34 1942 to the support line and destroy it at the end of the turn. So we get a 5/5, the same 5/5 Blitz tank with 2 op costs. So you need the credits to operate this. Which means that this is in effect 6 cost because it's 2 for Siberian Transfer and then 2 to move it forward and 2 to attack with it, unless using it from the back line, in which case I suppose it's technically 4, but if you're trading well you probably still want to push it forward. So this is not a super early card for us, and there are ways we can make this card a lot better. 845th Rifles. This card is incredibly pivotal to this deck and its use. This is the card that we really want to see in a perfect world get hit by ZHUKOV. It doesn't matter if it doesn't. But the key is that when this unit is dealt damage, your HQ gains an equal amount of defense. Now, one of the things I want to make clear here is that the use case in this card is not always the way that I see it used in some control decks. You do not always want to push this forward. Early in the game you often do because it just gives you a big body that does it, but later in the game when your opponent may be coming to attack you with big overwhelming units that have massive attack stats ploughing through your guards, holding this on your support line allows you to, for 1 credit when it can operate, turn that opponent's big unit's attack into an HQ defense buff, which of course negates damage that it can do to your HQ, and we are all about survival in this deck. Stiff upper lip, I run 3, I've seen an argument for 4 and I've seen an argument for 2, but I think 3 has worked out well for me. This is an excellent piece of draw because we are going to have guard. Draw 1 card for 2 isn't great, but sometimes it's worth it because we really need a card. Most of the time we're going to have a guard on the board, and this is 2 cost, draw 2 cards, and that's just good value. Thank you, the UK, for giving us that. Right, upgrade. We've arrived at the second half of the Siberian Transfer discussion. In a perfect world, we very much want to use Siberian Transfer and then attack with it, and then be able to play upgrade, because it gives us a whole nother body. So it allows us to use the T-34 to do 5 damage, often trading out an awkward unit with our opponent, and even if it's only got 1 health left, the new card, after it is destroyed, will of course be fully healed and good, and very good value, because the T-34 is not a cheap tank. But the other trick with this is if we have engineers on the board, it also heals us. This is a card that we really want to play these cards in combination wherever we can, but we can also use this in combination with one of the T-34s that we get from front formation late in the game if we haven't seen it early in the game, to pull off exactly the same trick. So now is probably a good time to talk about what we can get from this combination. So here it is. This is the T-34-85 1944. This card costs 8 credits, which means it costs exactly 3 more than our T-34. Which means if we Siberian transfer, move forward, run a hit, and then play it, this is the tank, because there is only one at this cost, that will appear on the board. And it's great. It has Blitz and Guard if we control 3 or more units. That's an important thing to be aware of. As a 7/7 with heavy armor, it's a good body. In an ideal world, we love when this has Blitz, because that means that for 2 cost for Siberian transfer, 2 cost to push up a tank, a further 2 cost to attack with the tank, which is 6, then another 2 cost, which takes us to 8 to play, upgrade, and then a further 2 to attack with this, we can, for 10 credits, theoretically deal 12 damage to our opponent's HQ, and that can be a win condition. Like a fire and forget missile, and will still leave us with a big body on the board. This is not an uncommon way for us to win late in the game. So this is a card to be very aware of, be very familiar with, even though it's not in your deck. You have a combo that guarantees you this card, and you know the exact credit cost that you need to pull off that combo, and this is going to become a thing in this deck. Playing this deck well requires that you have a very good knowledge of the deck, but we'll come back to that. But this addresses the question of what tank you're going to get. Next up, we have the I-15 CHAIKA. This is a special card, one of many special cards that we run. And this card is, again, just incredible value. It's a 1/2 fighter that on destruction gives us a 2/2 fighter. So really, that's it. It's just value. We love this as an early play because it gives us protection from early bombers, which can be good against air. Also, this is a great drop if we see it late in the game against, say, a ramp deck that's going to try and throw the big bombers at us, because it blocks the bomber twice, not once. Because yes, they can destroy it, but then they've got to destroy the second one. So this is definitely something to be aware of. Again, it is a tactical tool, and early on it can also be used as an aggressive tool to do some more damage. And of course, it can be used against aggro to use the 1 damage attack to remove an early unit that we have a problem with. T-94, Type 94 early, we're looking at you. And then get a 2/2 that we can trade out later or use to ping HQ. So definitely keep an eye on this card. It can be very, very useful. BM13N US6. This is just annoying for your opponent. This card is here for a number of reasons. Firstly, obviously, it's artillery, which gives us reach damage, and it's only 1 operation cost for 2 damage, which is pretty good. It has Blitz, which means for 4 credits we can put this down and fire it straight at HQ or a threat the turn it's deployed, which is all very well and good, but it's a 2/2, but its text is the most annoying thing in the world, because its text says, retreat this unit before damage is applied when it's attacked. So, this means that this card means your opponent has to waste some form of removal or AoE on this. Might get some other bonuses if he's got AoE, but your opponent is going to be forced at some point to deal with this, and they can't deal with it by attacking. They have to suppress it, then attack it, or they have to find a way to directly destroy it with removal, and this is the key, that we're not worried about how much damage this does, although it can be amazing, and if it hangs around it can be so much value. But what we really like about this is it basically clips a removal card from our opponent's deck, and we want to keep a careful track of how easily we can be removed, because that can be one of the things that can stall our win condition and lose us the game. Air power. This is kind of a tech choice in the current meta, primarily because 3 points for 2 damage to an enemy isn't great, although late in the game, if our opponent manages a quick comeback and manages to somehow clear the board and guard up so that we can't reach them, 2 points of damage to HQ could win us the game. Note, damage to an enemy, not an enemy unit. But primarily this is here for the first effect, which is destroy target tank. There are a number of incredibly frustrating tanks in the game right now that are a problem for us. Panther D, if it comes off Blitz Doctrine, any number of the British super annoying tanks that are big and heavy, and of course the big tanks in the mirror, pulled through the combo. Again, this is just a card to be aware of, but always be aware that you only have one of them. If you are desirous of having a second copy of this, and I have seen a good argument for it, I would consider cutting one stiff upper lip to replace with an extra air power. Have done it, has been okay. I haven't felt that I've needed 2 copies, but I have played this deck a lot. It might be that you find having a second copy is a little safer and you don't mind losing a little bit of draw. The Hammer, another piece of removal, and we like our removal. 6 damage to a ground unit, speaks for itself. I am only running 2 of these. Again, this is something you can trim and cut some other pieces for if you want to have just more guaranteed access to removal, but I found 3 was a little bit too heavy and I was occasionally getting hand-locked by them. But honestly, again, this is just a tool. As long as you know how many of them you've still got, you can prioritise targets with it, and that's the key to winning with this deck. MI5, so this might be one of those cards that, again, if you are thinking about cutting something to include something else in, you might want to think about, because this is a card that you need to use in a very particular way. MI5 is one of the most powerful tempo cards in the game, because it not only forces your opponent to redraw a previously drawn card, thus denying them a draw, it also gets you a draw. This can be huge. Played at the right time, this can win games. Which is to say, when you're concerned that your opponent has something in hand and you want a chance to get it pushed back, or more often, when your opponent has only 1 or 2 cards in hand and this just cripples their turn. 204th Guards, this is just another incredibly good value unit. This is a 4-cost guard. The shock is really a massive benefit because it allows you to continually use it to trade until your opponent does something about it, which once again makes it into a thing that takes removal away from your opponent that they might need against other threats. So it's just a good body with guard, and we love a good body with guard. That's kind of how this deck functions. BP-43 Armoured Train is one of the most annoying to trade out units in the game. The power of this unit is not necessarily in its constant spawning of 1/1s. I mean, it's nice, and if your opponent doesn't do something about it, they can become a problem. The biggest thing about this is how unbelievably awkward it is to get rid of, because it has heavy armor and 7 health, and heavy armor plus 7 health means that it's out of range of a lot of auto removal. There is some, but not a lot. And it's just awkward enough that it makes unit trading into it incredibly inefficient. And we want to force inefficiency on our opponent. I'll talk about that in a bit, but that's a big part of what this deck does. It is a disruptive control deck. Depths of Winter, this is one of the most powerful panic buttons we have. This card is our way of going, right, we're in a completely losing position, we know we are, our opponent has established board presence, particularly mid-range opponents may do this. Aggro opponents probably shouldn't. We have other ways of answering that. They shouldn't be able to establish it, but sometimes they do. But primarily against mid-range, this allows us to go, right, let's even the playing field. All units are equal, and I, because this is probably being played at least turn 7 or turn 8, have credits to spare to put something on the board afterwards, and that can be a huge tempo advantage. So again, this is a card to just be aware of the timing of use. There will be many games where you have this card and you never use it. The other side of the card that you will have and always use is the Glamour Boys. This thing is absolutely pivotal, because we run a full set of these, and we run a full set of these because they're a 3/6 guard, which means they're decently awkward to trade. They're 1 op cost, which means we can move them if we need to, but critically they give our HQ defense increase, which gives us survivability and fuel for front formation. See it, play it, profit for the most part. Careful about overcommitting, but it's pretty good. The 83rd Naval Brigade. Not only is this a guard with ambush, but this is also one of the most devastating removal tools in the game. Because for 7 cost, 1 bloody sickle followed by this, with very few exceptions, you can destroy literally anything in the game. Your opponent pulls off a massive, I don't know, Italy, Rome pull off where they all some kind of massive self-credit denial thing and ends up with a 24 unit, bloody sickle, Naval Brigade, boom. And I get an ambush guard. It's incredible. Husband it. Keep it for the emergency. Generally don't play it as a guard unless you know that you're not going to need it for removal. T-34 85 1945. Beast. Must remove. So on the one hand, this is 10 points, remove something with 6 defense with no consequence because it's got shock, heavy armor, and it can't be suppressed, and shock never goes away off this. But what it also is like a couple of other cards in this, a piece of removal that your opponent can't use anywhere else because they have to remove this, because if they don't, they lose. Because this thing just keeps going. Or they have to trade it out for crazy, crazy inefficient value. Either way, we profit, and that's how this deck runs. Great card, but be aware that you really want to have 10 credits to get any good value out of it. 122nd Corson. Love this card because the wider we go, which can happen a lot earlier, the cheaper it becomes, and at 5/7 it's an unbelievably awkward guard to get rid of. Pretty much the point of the whole thing. So we just love this, it's good value card. Strategic Focus, one of our board clears. We can target this, which is good, and in particular this is our best tool against air because we don't run a lot of air units, and if they do, we can just remove them. It's also really good against Throp or Ramp decks that drop multiple big heavy bombers. Don't waste it. Carpet Bombing, this is kind of our quick release board clear. We just want to find a good value time to play this to break down our opponent's tempo and disrupt their plans. It's pretty much what it's here for. 4th Guards Rifles. This thing is insane. We want to see this. We want to watch it and get it reduced down. But also, we're playing late enough that sometimes we don't care. Pay 7 or 8 for this. I've paid 9 for this. In fact, I've paid 11 for this to blitz it when it's had ZHUKOV on it. And not regretted it. This thing is very, very good. And finally, front formation. This is not the only win condition in this deck, and I will emphasise this because you do not always win off front formation, but it is a very good win condition from this deck because we are in a position to both be guarded up, control the board, and have a huge pile of spare HQ defence with which to pay for our infinite army of T-34 1942s. Timing this, however, is crucial, because you can just kill yourself, particularly in the mirror or against a guard-heavy enemy. If they can stall out long enough, you can lose off the back of this, so use it tactically. But we'll talk about that in a minute, because next up, tactics. Right, tic-tacs. Very British joke, possibly. I think international enough that a lot of people will get it. Tell me in the comments if you don't. The method of using this deck is very specific. And it requires 2 things, and it's why this deck is incredibly good, but also why this deck is incredibly hard to use well. The first thing it requires is that you have an absolutely fundamental understanding of every card in this deck and how many copies you have. So much so that when you first start playing this deck, I, with no irony in my voice whatsoever, recommend that you make sure you have a piece of paper or a notepad with the deck list in front of you and cross off things when you use them. Because if you do not know what is left and available to you, you do not know how to read the board state to predict your opponent's likely play, and therefore know that you have the right tool to win against them. Which leads me to the second half of how you play this deck, and you play this deck by knowing the meta. Almost every win that I get regularly on this deck comes down to the fact that I am playing into decks that I understand. Almost every loss that I get against this is against a deck that I don't necessarily expect, and therefore have to take a minute to work out whether I'm using things correctly, which can be a killer in this. But for the most part, in a predictable meta, the higher on ladder you get, the more consistent for me this deck becomes, because you can see the likely decks you're playing into and you can understand the way that they want to do things. And this comes down to knowing the right time to play cards. So each and every one of the cards in this deck is, for the most part, in one way or another, a tool. A tool that we can use to either address a threat or adjust board position or give ourselves some form of advantage, usually in the form of HQ defense or a guard. Knowing when to time those plays is critical. The difference between when I would play a CHAIKA against an aggro deck that has Japan main or a US ramp deck is night and day, because I don't have other fighters in deck, so I need them for the late game, because my only good answers to their aircraft, super consistent answers, are strategic focus and being able to block out with CHAIKA. That's important. In the same context, understanding your credit total and how you're going to spend it is huge. So the other thing that I strongly recommend you do is play slowly and take your whole turn. Whenever you play this deck on ladder and you play people who are good at this or SOV Italy Control, you will probably find one of the things that frustrates you is the fact that they seem to take forever and a day on their turns. This is why. Because to be good on this deck, you actually have to think ahead. It's a little bit like chess, in that you are trying to predict what your opponent is likely to be playing and doing and what your best answers to it are. I have had other people pick up this deck list and come back to me and go, but I keep losing on it. Then had a chat with them about playing it, which is why I'm doing this video, kind of. And then have them come back and go, oh my god, I'm like winning so much now. And that is the difference. The difference is knowledge and capability on it. I consider myself pretty good on this deck. There are a couple of players out there, if you get a chance to see them play. If J King is ever playing this deck or his version of this deck, I think he has one card different to me. Last I checked with him anyway. On stream, you should watch and understand and try and understand his mental process, because dude's a genius on this deck. And if you are good, if you concentrate, if you can focus and think your turns through, this deck is incredibly consistent. If, however, you play quickly or have lapses of judgment or get distracted, you will just lose a lot, because you can't afford to misuse your resources. So again, that's part of why I have talked, as I did in the deck build, about the fact that you can sub a few things out. Anyway, that's kind of enough of me waffling on about how to play the deck. Why don't I show you how I played the deck, both well and badly, because that's kind of the point of these things, in some footage. And that'll be it. That'll be the video done. So as ever, if you find it useful, if you've enjoyed it, all of that stuff, like, subscribe, come catch me on Twitch if you can. If you can support the channel in any way, please do. Life is very difficult for me right now. There's a lot going on, and any financial support I can get, I cannot stress the difference it makes right now. As ever, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was useful. Stay well, be good humans, and I'll catch you next time. Okay, into some game footage. Our first game. See the title on screen of whatever we were playing into. I'm just kind of give you my commentary as I go. So we see US. First thing we're thinking here is the default at the minute is to assume that this might be a very long game. because ramp is usually what we're going to see, and it can be a difficult matchup for us because it can get an awful lot of value, especially if it uses retribution. So we take a look at our mulligan. I'm keeping 845th and the CHAIKA because both are just really good value tools. 845th is going to give us some early healing. It's good because later on we're going to want front formation. CHAIKA is just good value because obviously it gives us a unit that then dies when it dies is replaced. Hammer's good to see. Sickle's good to see. Bit of removal, not going to hurt, but not often that great into ramp. But we'll see what our enemy selects. Well, my instinct here is this might not be great. Could be a bit awkward. So our opponent passes, so we're still definitely thinking ramp. Another sickle isn't great. 845th or CHAIKA. I go with CHAIKA here because it's less likely that our opponent is going to put down a body to do anything with the 845th, so we can probably get the CHAIKA down and then deploy the 845th and get an attack off with the CHAIKA if our opponent doesn't have any kind of removal for it. That's sort of what we're banking ourselves on. So we see Grasshopper. Now this tells me that we're actually going to see a Sherman-based deck. Now that's interesting because that's a much better matchup for us because Shermans tends to struggle hard to keep up if we can just stay on top of their tools. So I'm thinking here about what is my best way to thin down my opponent's win chances, and honestly, removing the Grasshopper, as expensive as it is in this instance, because it's going to cost us both sickles and the CHAIKA attack, really slows our opponent down. And that can be crippling if they are playing it. Now, we could have gone with an extra sickle. I should probably not have played quite as quickly. The extra sickle might have been arguably better. The loss of a hit point on the CHAIKA isn't that great, but something to be aware of. I was playing quite quickly here. I think I must have been distracted. But now our opponent's trying to figure out what to do next without a Grasshopper on the board. Now, this is an interesting one. And again, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, I recorded these as I went. In this case, our opponent just recognises they can't win. Anyway, so second game. Now, seeing Soviets is always worrying because this means that we're into probably a very long fight, because the most likely thing right now is that we're going to see Soviet control, and more specifically Soviet Italy control, which is going to try and take advantage of a few tools we don't. It's stronger on removal, but as I've mentioned in my discussion of the deck in general, I don't think it has the end game. I'm keeping the hand because it's good. I've got engineers, I've got the 845th rather. 204th is a decent play later. Glamour Boys is just value, and we love the BM because that's going to give us a way of responding to their aircraft, which we're going to expect to see. Easy drop first is the engineers. We're going to put them in a position where they kind of need to answer that, or we're going to get value out of units when they remove them, which they will. Now, obviously, the most likely thing they're going to do here is claim the skies, so we're going to give them a different target for claim the skies and make them figure out how they want to do this. Depending on what they draw, they will be able to remove one or other of our engines for healing. In this case, they're going to go straight for the engineers. I assume this means they have a sickle in hand. We'll find out in a bit. Obviously, I'm going to push up. ZHUKOV is good play here because getting something with Blitz, 845th is an amazing hit for ZHUKOV, is huge. Also 845th with a buff is obviously more healing option for us. There's the sickle. As I said, I was expecting that. Their claim the skies would have made a lot less sense had they not done it. They're going face because they get healing, which makes sense. We can also get some healing by trading in. And we can put a guard up to prevent them continuing to go face. So guard up first. We'll eat more of their removal. In this case, it looks like they're just going to remove our 845th, which is kind of okay. This is where we decide what to do. Glamour Boys is just an easy slam here. We just want to get ourselves in a position where we're well guarded up, because we don't want them getting too far ahead. Now, Armoured Train this early is an interesting shout from our opponent. This is quite aggressive for a control deck. We could drop the big guard, but in the end, I actually elect to drop the artillery because it's covered by the guard, and that means that we're now threatening to remove the aircraft. We've got draw. Draw last, not ideal, but we weren't really going to change our play based on what we saw. This is going to be a match about patience. The Detrima, obvious. Really smart move. Obviously, our opponent knows what they're doing, which is something to be aware of, because that is a good remove. We have a good hand, but we have a slow hand, and that's normal on this deck. So now we're going to think carefully about how we want to deal with what's in front of us. At some point, we need to deal with the continued value generation, but we also need to put our opponent under pressure. So this is where we use the buffed and blitzing unit and cover it with a guard. This is just to make the front line awkward for our opponent to deal with, and gives us space, of course, to put down the 9-9, which asks them to find another piece of removal. Now, we know they're going to have another piece of removal. Here comes the dagger strikes, which we expect. We keep a little track of this. We know we've seen this. Quite often, this is what that guard is going to do, is it's just going to deny removal in the mirror. It's not necessarily going to win you the game or really do any damage. Now, front formation's a great top deck here, because now we can start thinking about a way to create constant pressure. And that's kind of the only way we're likely to win this. So Glamour Boys is important because it's building up our HP pool, because we need our HQ defense to be high enough that we can get value. We also need to find some removal tools to deal with everything that's in front of us. Strategic focus is fine, but is actually going to come up short in dealing with the tank. They're clearing some space, which means Naval Brigade, which is not a shock. Good remove. We're going all out to try and get the aggressive play here, so now we have to think. So the first thing we're going to do is remove the engine. We don't want constant unit generation. We want to start putting the pressure on them in the next couple of turns. Ideally, we want to put some pressure on the front line so that they can't take it off us, because we want the front line to give us feed for front formation. Hopefully, that's what we're about to see. Hopefully, we will be in a position now to use front formation. Now, this is a big play. Their opponent's gone super hard to try and take it back. They can see what's coming. Drop the armoured train to give us some cover. We're going to have to take this a bit slower than we want to. Not great. We would have liked to have been in a better position, but we are biding our time, and we do have strategic focus, which gives us an excellent infantry or ground unit board clear. Claim the Skies is kind of problematic. I mean, that's a lot of damage. Now we have to really think about how we want to do this. So we want to clear this out as cheaply as possible. So we use the unit to get rid of ambush so that we can get the healing. We're not bothered about sacrificing. And at this point, we've got a big tank that's going to get shock back, which is now covered. So we've now gone from being behind on HQ defense to being ahead on HQ defense and in a position where we can pressure. Second dagger strikes, as I say, we keep a track of that. Another copy of the big cavalry. There are a few things we could do here. And we take a moment to think, but depths is just a very... Now, these may seem like a weird depths play, but with what we have in hand, we can get the tempo back. We have a CHAIKA, we have the ability to deploy a tank that we can sacrifice, and of course we have strategic focus if we need it. Kind of ignoring our opponent's taunting. So they're going to put down the big unit. That's okay. They are presumably feeling really good because they got past the point, but front formation here is huge, and we push up. Now this is important. We are pushing up the CHAIKA here to make it harder for our opponent to deny the front line for the tank spam. They can. They will, but it's harder and it makes the trade more complicated for them. So at this point we know what we have to do. We need to get rid of the guard, and we can. Siberian Transfer is really useful for that. 2 damage to face and some draw, which is good. And we again push up. Our opponent knows where we're at. We are constantly saying here, we will keep pushing up, because we know that we have the momentum. As this is an interesting play, and I do this quite quickly, but you'll see why in a minute. So the hammer comes down, straight into carpet bombing, because this is a complete board clear. Leaves only 1 point of damage on the board, and we have a way of dealing with that. There's 1 point of health left on the tank. We don't mind, our tank was going to blow up anyway. So we've completely cleared yet another board of threat. Glamour Boys comes down because we want the extra HQ defense and to make sure we're guarded up. We've got a point of damage from the SICKLE, which means that this is a straight remove. We push up the 2-2, so now it becomes incredibly unlikely that our opponent can take the front line back. They might, but it will be expensive. Going for that kind of signals it, and again we get a surrender. But again, it was just playing pressure. Our opponent knew that the pressure was going to win. Going into another game. We'll see what this one brings. This is an interesting one, because I will actually say that this was one of those places where I'm kind of aware what my opponent's playing, because I've come across this player before while I've been playing on ladder, and I happen to know that they have been on a Soviet-US self-damage list. So I am thinking here about value tools and the best way to use them. The CHAIKA's good, having an 845th is nice, Naval Brigade could be very important. We can get some effect, because a lot of their units will be damaged. They open with ZHUKOV, very aggressive. CHAIKA comes down. I'm also, of course, aware that this means that my opponent might well know what I'm on, if they remember having come across me or keep records. So, as expected, we see the drop. I'm immediately removing this. I'm not hanging around, because we don't want early position. Having early advantage on self-damage like this is just a death knell for our deck. We're not fast enough that if they're able to accelerate, we can keep up. T-35 coming down, we're less worried about, because we can heal. We don't want them to really have access to a lot of draw. And we could deny it here. 845th goes down, we're going to deny the draw and do a point of damage to HQ. We're denying the draw because, again, what we want to do is slow them down. We can keep them slow. We have a chance to go past kind of the, as it were, the apex of the corner in the game and be in a position where we have the advantage. But that won't happen if they could have actually pulled off the draw from this SU. That would have given them a huge advantage. They're now pushing up their damaging tank. Now, this is again, if I remember correctly, this is going to be a play that's interesting, so I'm going to choose to remove this. I could have chosen to just stow it out and let it keep dealing damage, but it didn't seem optimal at the moment. We can guard up later, and what we really want to do is encourage them to keep playing out cards that we can remove before they get benefit. Taking out the 845th is kind of fine, actually. because they've set themselves up to just be easily removed here because we have the damage we need to remove the tank that's in the front line. And we then do a thing that I do quite regularly on this deck, which I know is something that people wonder about. I often push up the CHAIKA when it's still got the death effect, destruction effect on it, because it gives us a support line position. And we know that we can take advantage of that. So there comes the big guard. We get to see the big bodies start to come down, which we knew was going to happen. Traders out, give us the fighter. They choose not to bounce the BM here, which I consider to be interesting. They didn't have their credits. They would have liked to have, no doubt. I don't think they had the credits to do it, but I was too busy thinking about my own turn. Obviously, Naval Brigade is just super cheap removal, and now means that both of their tanks are going to suffer because they won't survive the ambush. So they're finally getting draw off. But they're getting draw off after we've established ourselves a bit, and that helps. They do new to the guard. However, we just drop another one. Clear, we push up the body because it just serves as a handy speed bump and gives us another advantage on HQ, so they're now down to 9 HQ, and we have 18 and a guard up and a piece of artillery and an aircraft in position. They can get to us, they can trade, but it's going to cost them an awful lot. And this is kind of what I mean about waiting to see if we can get to the point whereby we have enough of a position that we might actually have a win in hand rather than not being able to. And now for the final push to remove this, which is kind of fine. Gets them 5 points of damage to HQ. I'm not sure that's a good trade for 5 points of damage to HQ, and I'm not entirely sure what this was about. I think it just cheapened the guard in their hand, but I don't know whether getting that out that early made this big of a difference, but we'll find out. Another guard down, this one has shock, and then we think about how we want to handle this. In the end, I'm going to draw to see if I can get something more handy. Tank removal's good, but we'd like to save it for something bigger, so artillery and sacrificing the aircraft is fine, just to give us time. They don't have anything that can reach us. They do run blitz tanks. They're going to have Hellcats, but Hellcat right now isn't enough. Another big body comes down. Now, the SU is a problem. We don't want the SU because the SU's healing, and we don't want them to have healing. Carpet bombing top deck is kind of huge here, because that removes the SU, kills off one of the units, and we can shock trade the other, and then we can just plink safely. We could draw, choose not to, choose to put down. I could have just plinked the HQ for 2, but with them being short-handed, I was pretty sure this was going to be the inevitable result, and it was. Right. Time for another game. Now, this one I remember, but I'll commentate you through as best I can, because this was interesting. So, opening hand, kind of not amazing, kind of not. We have playable cards, but we'd like to see some board present. So we keep MI5 because we can use it as a tempo card if we get a bad draw, which we do, by the way. This is really not good. So MI5 is going to be very important for a bit of gaining card advantage, because by playing MI5, we not only deny them a draw because we put it back and they draw it again, we get ourselves an advantage draw, so we effectively jump ahead 2 draws. They're ramping. Going to see a lot of that. ZHUKOV seems good because we have a decent chance of hitting something good. 204th is perfect, but it's not terrible. It's a good body and it has shock. Still digging. So we start to wonder now what this might be. And I have my instincts kind of tingling now about the fact that we might be about to see some Commandos nonsense. So the first thing I do is put down a big body that, if this is Commandos nonsense, because we've seen quite a bit of this on ladder recently, this is a target for the hit points, and we immediately find out it definitely is Commando nonsense. Straight into Commando raid with the number 9, which is good removal, by the way. But we've got a few options. We want bodies. So we put bodies. Every time they get hit, they're going to heal us. And Commando's ping damage is random, so we can take advantage of that. and we will continue to do so wherever we possibly can in this match, because it's our best chance of winning. We do have carpet bombing, which is going to be useful. Obviously, we know we run removal, but we don't run a huge amount of mass removal, so we're going to have to use it carefully. We can deal with 3 full sets of commandos because we have both carpet bombings and strategic focus. We can Depths of Winter another one, and then we have, obviously, Sickle and stuff like this. This is a big wave after wave play because they realise that they need to clear out the body. Corson is an amazing top deck here because it's a big body. I'm thinking for a minute, do I want to deploy some other units first? But in the end, I'm just content to put Corson down and create yet another wideness of target for the Commandos. Because what they're going to do is what they are doing, which is just continuing to spam orders and ping, and we just need things to absorb it so it's not all hitting HQ. We can do it is pretty interesting order choice here. This is frustrating because it takes us out of carpet bombing range, but then we get the God top deck, and we are just going to play it. We're only losing 1 hit point on our unit, and we're just going to remove their board. I'm going to let them get established, because if they get too established, they'll just keep rolling, and we will lose. Another commando raid comes, but that's alright. We have carpet bombing, Baker Street irregulars, depends on what commando they choose to generate. We'd like to see them go a little bit wider for carpet bombing. But we do know we've still got sickles to find. Keep calm. Takes them to 3, and now I have to be a bit thoughtful because they might have another keep calm at some point, which would take them out of carpet bombing range. So I just remove all I can, being quite aggressive. Because we do know that they can only generate a finite number of commandos. This is just a race to see if we can control them enough to avoid that finite number of commandos being enough to beat us. And it might very well be. So the big bomber comes down. Now this is a bit problematic, because we don't have a particularly good answer. The guard doesn't help, but thankfully this one comes with Blitz. We remember this from earlier. And now we've got some more draw, and we're just thinking, do we want to? And I choose not to. I don't want to risk overdraw. We've got enough in hand that we can deal with this. If all else fails, we have depths. We'd love to see a sickle right now, because sickle would allow us to cleanly remove a couple of sickles, technically, would allow us to cleanly remove the bomber, which would be great. However, it is very likely that we're just Depths of Wintering here, because they've started to establish, so I immediately just Depths of Winter, and we top deck a Glamour Boys, which is better than the Naval Brigade, which we would put down otherwise. So once again, we're just taking their momentum away from them. They're looking to advantage the Commandos damage, which we need to be cautious of, but we do have the hammer, which just is currently zeroing in on its most obvious target. We are hoping to see a sickle at some point, which would help, but right now we are definitely looking at this and thinking about good ways to do stuff. They're digging for a random British elite, probably another commando. They get quite unlucky there, but they're going to pin us. Not a problem. The hammer comes down. Interception. That's annoying. But, again, we focus. We have a slower answer. And here we have to think about how best to control things. They only have 4 cards. We're going to deny them down to 3. And this is a huge draw for us. Because now units that die heal us. Removing our guard, getting lucky with the pings, and removing our artillery is actually going to give us more HQ defense, and they really don't want us to have more HQ defense. That would be tremendously bad for them. So they play the Avray. Now that's kind of not an ideal play for me, because they are giving us the Glamour Boys value again, unless they have a way to really be sure they can kill us. Now this is where we have to be careful, because they might be able to get lethal out of this. They bring us all the way down to 4. Thankfully, we top deck a second Glamour Boys, so now we're all the way back to 12, and we can put Engineers down. Rangers is bad, because it's increasing value. Bomber Mafia is frustrating, because it's going to give them some reach, which we'll probably need to answer. More and more, this is looking like a loss, because we're not seeing our best answers. The Engineers being removed is very bad. So now we have to think about how we want to deal with this. Naval Brigade obviously answers the Avray really well. We're going to do first. BM lets us answer the Commandos, and we can draw to refill our hand. Try and get something useful for next turn. Siberian Transfer is good to see. But we need to find a way to get on the offensive before they're able to re-establish. Liberator comes down. Obviously, we need to do something about that. But we are limited in our options. So we're taking a moment here to think. The CHAIKA denies the Liberator access, which is good, because we can effectively air guard. We remove the Commando because we don't want the ping damage. If up alert, we're drawing because we might find a better answer, but we don't, so the CHAIKA will come down. We leave the artillery open because if they attack it, it just bounces back to hand, which we don't mind anyway. Drop a guard unit. We eat the point of damage just to deny any 9 commando shenanigans, because they might be running 9 and be able to remove one of our guards super cheaply, which would be bad. As it is, we've got 2 turns protected from the bomber, which we hope will be enough to find an answer to the bomber and an answer to the board problem. Upgrade is very, very good here. So we push up the shock guard. We're going to use Siberian Transfer to remove. The trade is fine because we then upgrade, which lets us remove the bomber, and now we're in a much stronger position. Front formation's not great for us until we can find some heal, but we do have 845th, and now we're in a much stronger position. We now have control of the board, card advantage, and really good offensive options with reach. Our opponent passes, which is kind of understandable. We take a moment to think whether they're playing countermeasures. National Fire Service is incredibly predictable, so we're going to take a moment here and think, well, okay, we'll deny you a card, draw a card for us. And I'm tempted at this point to do a couple of things. 845th is the thing here, but also I'm just thinking, do I just push up the massive T-34 and put a huge amount of damage? 16, 18, effectively 20 damage on board, leaving them only 10 HP, HQ defense, so we win. Again, just momentum was the thing that won us that game, and that's it. That's the game footage for Soviet Brit Control. Hopefully it was useful.